All right, wait, but how do you want us to start? Just like that was good?
Just like that.
Okay.
Welcome to episode 5 of the Small Tales podcast. I'm your host, Michael Barbaro Jr. Today's guest is Sebastian Trujillo, co-host of the podcast Mas Allá del Deporte, alongside Albert Portis, who couldn't be here today. Let's welcome them to the show. Welcome to the podcast, Sebastian. It's a pleasure to have you here. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience at home? And for Albert,
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan. I've seen a bunch of your guys' episodes, and I'm very happy with your guys' work. I am Sebastian Trujillo. I am a graduate student at the University of New Haven, currently getting my MBA with a focus in global supply chain management. I am the graduate assistant for the golf program at the university, and I am also uh, making a podcast with Thomas Maynard and Albert Portas. Albert couldn't be here with us today. He's a guy from Spain. He's also a graduate student at the University of New Haven. He plays soccer for the university. And yeah, I mean, Albert and I are the co hosts of the podcast, and Thomas is the mastermind behind it.
well, congratulations on everything.
Thank you. Thank you.
First question of the podcast. What inspired you to start this podcast, and how did you and Albert come up with the idea help young athletes navigate studying and competing in the United States?
You know, I this is my second podcast on a similar topic. I had one last year with a friend, Nicolas Cortez. It was called Café Goles y Greens. It was not nearly as professional as the podcast that we have today with Mas Allá del Deporte. But Café Goles y Greens basically uh, encapsulated a very similar thematic and very similar topic about international student athletes. It was in Spanish. Nico and I were both from Colombia, but it was more fun rather than like serious. I met Albert through a common friend, and he told me that he wanted to do a podcast. Nico graduated from the university, so I stopped doing that first podcast. Met Albert, sat down with him, basically told me exactly what idea he had. I said, yeah, let's do it. We have the studio at the University of New Haven, which is absolutely amazing. And then the same friend that introduced me to Albert introduced us to Thomas. And then it just all came together.
Wow. It's a great thing that you want to help kids from different countries in the United States. What you're doing is a wonderful thing. I'll tell you that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. For listeners who may not know, could you give an overview what it means to get sports scholarships in the US and what opportunities it opens up for international students?
You know, sports scholarships is a big subject, amongst high school students, amongst high school athletes, not only in the United States but also outside the United States. Of course, there's a lot of topics and a lot of content about it within the US, but for athletes that are outside the United States that have dedicated their entire life to a sport, whether it is golf, whether it is tennis, whether it is soccer, college athletics in the United States is a great, great opportunity for anybody, especially for people outside this country, because nowhere else you will find something like the NCAA that you guys have here in the United States.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some of the most common questions that students and families have about recruiting process, and how do you address these on the podcast?
Well, the main questions that we get is like, how should I contact coaches? What are coaches looking for? What do they like? Right? And then Albert, having gone through the recruiting process almost 3 times, I believe, and then me, I went through the recruiting process twice, and now I am the one recruiting. We give both of our perspectives on the recruitment process, on what coaches want to see, whether it is from a soccer standpoint, but whether it is from a golf standpoint. Um, we both agree that the skill level has to be there.
Yeah.
That's a given. That's step one. You have to be good enough to draw the attention of a coach. But then once that is there, there are a lot more pieces of the puzzle that you also have to worry about, or that you also have to navigate to finally land a sports scholarship or a roster spot alone.
That's a great answer.
Thank you.
It's also really interesting that you pick like specific players to get scholarships to or give them scholarships.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Okay. You and Albert both bring unique insights to the show. Could you tell us more about Albert's role and how you both collaborate to make each other episode valuable for your audience?
I would say Albert and I are both perfectionists, like, right? We like to see things done the best way possible. However, I feel like Albert pushes us a little bit more towards like making the podcast better, making the video a little bit better.
He finds out 110%.
Yeah. He finds that little bit that is missing and tries to fix it and tries to solve it and tries to make it better. And we both have a very like-minded of like, okay, this is what happened here and we want to improve for the next time. But we took a little bit with Albert and Thomas coming out with that first episode because we really wanted it to be a really good one. To the point where I sat Albert down, I was like, Albert, we need to release the first episode this week because we were taking a little bit, but it was good. We are all very proud of that first episode, and I would say Albert is very dynamic. He has very clear what he wants to share with the audience, and like I said, he's that guy that wants it to be as good as it can be.
That's wonderful. And for both of you just to work together and just make the dream work, that's even better.
Yeah, it's three of us with Thomas.
Okay. Could you walk us through some of the key steps to recruitment process for international athletes?
Yeah, certainly. Uh, Key steps for the recruitment process. Number one, I would say a lot of competition, keeping track of your stats, right? Coaches want to see that you're competing consistently. Coaches want to see what type of stats you're putting up. Obviously, it changes from sport to sport. One thing is soccer, one thing is basketball, one thing is golf. Um, Compete as much as possible, for sure. Um, then the highlight reel is super important, or your recruitment video. It's really, really important that you showcase uh, whatever is important within your sport, right? So, like the highlight reel is very different for soccer than it is for golf. For golf, coaches look for a lot more technical stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because in golf, you can see the numbers, right? It's like, how well can you do? It's like, how fast can you swim? It's a number that it's not going to get changed. For soccer, it's a little more of an art because you can influence the game without it showing or reflecting in the stats.
Yeah.
In golf, it will always reflect in the stats. So depending on the sport, there's a different goal with this highlight video. And then lastly, and I would say most importantly, getting comfortable talking with coaches and reaching out to the universities that you are really interested in and where you would realistically be able to make the team. Because a lot of people want to make Stanford, a lot of people want to make Arizona State, right? They want to make the absolute best team that they can. And I'm not cutting their wings or anything. You should aim as high as you can, and you might make it, right? But when it comes down to that last year or when making a decision, you have to be honest with yourself in regards of, okay, what are my playing abilities and where will I be able to contribute, right? Will I be able to contribute in Stanford?
Yeah.
If the answer is yes, then you reach out and then you follow that route. But yeah, it's really important for you to get comfortable talking to coaches, talk to as many universities as you can, even if it's just for practice. And then, well, Let your charisma and your playing ability take care of the rest.
That's a great perspective on the question.
Thank you.
Okay. How does your podcast help young athletes understand the academic requirements and balance needed between studies and sports?
Well, actually, in an episode that we recorded recently, we were talking about how hard it was for us to get into the university and how good our English had to be. We have to keep in mind that Albert is from Spain and I am from Colombia, and English is the second language for both of us. So we both had to take exams to get into the universities. We both have to take exams to prove that our English is good enough to be able to go to college in the United States. On top of that, obviously, it depends from university to university, the academic requirements. But we share in the podcast basically our stories. We share exactly what we went through, what exams we took, uh, how much we studied for them. I think Albert had to take the same exam maybe 3 times, but then he got through. He got the score that he needed, and then he went to the university. Albert's English was not nearly as good as mine, and he'll say it in the podcast. Uh, I had a pretty good English base when I got here, but like I say, this podcast we share stories from different people and how many different ways there is to get to the same place.
That's wonderful. Let's see. How does hosting the podcast in Spanish help you connect with young athletes and families? And why is it important for you and Albert to make this information accessible in Spanish?
Well, like I said earlier, there's a lot of information about the NCAA and about the recruitment process and about what it takes to be a college athlete in English. But we found that that is not the case in Spanish. There's a gap in within the Spanish speaking community, and there's a lot of people out there, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Latin America, that would be heavily benefited from this. So I guess that's how we concluded that Spanish was the best language to conduct the podcast in. However, we will have episodes in English if our guest is an English speaking person, right? Which we plan to have. So eventually we will have episodes in English. The vast majority of episodes will be in Spanish.
That's great. Have it accessible both to Hispanic people and English people.
Correct.
Okay. How do you choose from which topics to cover? And do you receive questions or suggestions directly from listeners that shape your episodes?
Yes, most definitely. We take the feedback that we receive from our listeners, and we answer the questions that they want answered, and then we have like a base, right? Which is like these are the main questions that we want to answer. We want to answer how hard is it to get into a university. We want to answer how good should your English be. We want to answer, you know, how did you get there, right? How did Albert get there? How did Sebastian get there? And then when we have guests, we answer these same questions, and like I said before, we realize how there's so many paths to get into college sports.
That's actually so it's actually almost like a journey just to get to where you want.
Yep, yep. And then moving forward, after every single episode, we give a read to the comments, we reply to the comments, and then we answer any questions that we didn't think of, and then we implement it on the next podcast.
So it's basically like you're building on top of what you already have.
Yep. We're
'Cause
just we're just trying to make it better. We're trying to make it as good as it can be.
that's great. I think what you're doing is a wonderful thing, and I usually don't see that, not just on the podcast, but in the outside world. I normally don't see people like you. You are one of a kind, and I'll tell you that.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay. What What's one of the most memorable success stories you and Albert have featured where a young athlete achieved their dream of studying and completing in the US?
Wow. Well, I mean, in episode 3, which is not out yet, we share a few success stories. I know Albert's brother is playing professional soccer in Spain. He came to the United States to play in Cleveland State in Ohio with him. Uh, I would say my story is a good one, and I had a blast playing college golf, and I won one tournament during my college career in golf. I must say it's not that easy to win. You know, in football, in basketball, you win more times than you lose, and that's a good season. In golf, if you win once or twice, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I won once within my college career, and I hold that moment very, very close to my heart. And then, obviously, for Albert, I think he's playing a soccer game right now. Uh, After the podcast, I will check if they win or lose, but they're having a really good season. And I know Albert, when he played at Cleveland State in Ohio, they had a fantastic season. As soon as he got there, he made an immediate impact on the team. They won the conference, they won the tournament, and I think it was the very first time that the university had won a conference championship. So there was this big event. He goes into detail in our podcast, but yeah, I would if he was here, I would say maybe that's what he would answer.
I really hope his team wins. And my uncle and me and my dad, my brother, we all play golf. And you have to be very precise when you're trying to get into the hole. And having one or two wins, that is awesome.
Yes, yes. It's golf. Golf is not an easy sport. For the ones that think so, I suggest you go ahead and try it. So I guess you understand what it takes
Yeah.
and how hard it can be.
Yeah. Some parts it can get really difficult,
Yeah.
but some parts it can be easier.
You know, it's like anything. Some days you wake up and it's super easy, and the next day you wake up and it's harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's how sports goes.
That's actually you're actually right on that. Usually for like most of my soccer games, usually it's up and down and
Yeah,
we win, we lose.
yeah, and it's funny because we talk with Albert in the podcast, and he says it's funny because one day when you're feeling great, you're feeling fast, you're feeling precise with your movements during the warm up, you go to the game and you don't do anything.
Yeah.
And then you go to the next match and you feel like you ate too much before the match, you're a little bloated, you're not moving as quickly, your passes are imprecise during the warm up, and then you go play the game, you score 2 goals, you make 1 assist, and you're like, why?
That's great. Yeah.
But that's how sports go. Really, that's how life goes sometimes. Whenever everything seems to be in place, something goes wrong, and then whenever everything seems to be wrong,
Something goes right.
something goes right, and then everything is right. So yeah, it's funny.
Definitely right about that. That happens like all the time for me. Okay. What is one of your most memorable success stories you and Albert have featured? Oh, okay. Where can people watch the podcast and where can viewers expect new episodes?
New episodes. Right now we are on YouTube as Más Allá del Deporte. Uh, Episode 1 is out. We have already over 500 views and growing. Episode 2 will come out this Friday on YouTube. We will get episode 1 and 2 on Spotify, hopefully by the end of this week. And then we are looking to grow it and to place these same episodes in Apple Music and other platforms just to make it available to as many people as possible.
That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah. Right now, only YouTube.
But you're going to expand as you go on with the podcast?
Yep, correct. The recordings are there, the content is there. We'll just showcase it in different platforms. But YouTube is our main one right now.
Well, I hope you reach your goal.
Thank you.
Lastly, for listeners who want more information or have specific questions, how can they reach out or find you and additional resources related to your podcast?
We are on Instagram as at Más Allá del Deporte podcast. You're probably going to have to slow that one down and really go letter by letter. It's basically the name of the podcast and with the word podcast at the end. and then you can DM us there. You can look it up on YouTube, and you can comment on any of the episodes, and that is the best way to get in touch with us.
Okay. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, guys. It's truly an honor to be here. I absolutely love the setup. I love the professionalism, and I can't wait to be back sometime with good news.
Yeah. Well, one thing, you and Albert are doing such a great job on what you're doing. I hope you make it far, and I just wish you luck from there.
Thank you so much. We send a little hi to Albert over there. He's playing soccer right now. We hope he wins the soccer game.
Yeah.
Go Chargers.
Good luck, Albert.
Yep. Good
Yeah.
luck, Albert.
Thank you for watching episode 5 of the Small Tales podcast. Make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. If you would like to get your business on the podcast, please send us an email at the email on the screen. We'll see you next time on the Small Tales podcast. Have a good one.